Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Now it's been a good while since I completed a review of an internet radio, about a year in fact, and now seems a good time to do another one. So in this video we're going to cover the Pure Elan Connect portable internet radio, and I hope you enjoy it. Amazingly, despite Pure being quite a big digital brand in the UK, and despite me already owning quite a few Pure products myself, I've never actually reviewed one of their devices on the channel before, so we're going to change that today. So I've had this radio in its box for over a year, and every time I was about to do a review of it, I had another idea for a video, which meant it pushed it back a little bit further. So you may justifiably ask the question, what's the reason I'm doing this review now? Well, it's linked to a comment I received on another review I've done in the past, and that's for the Lemega IR1. There are links to that in the description. And the commenter mentioned that it looks similar to the Pure Elan Connect. Now I hadn't seen that resemblance before, probably due to the fact it was a different colour and the button positioning on the Pure device were different, but it intrigued me enough to dust off the box and just see how similar they are. So with the unboxing going on in the background, I'm going to start by giving you a bit of history about the Pure brand. Now, Pure is a British company which was started in 2002 as a subdivision of Imagination Technologies, who used to make chips for the original iPhones. Now, to cut a long story short, Pure International, as they are now known, was sold in 2016, when Apple announced that they were going to start using their own design chips going forward, and Imagination went into a bit of a freefall. Since then, Pure have consolidated their range to include compact audio systems, DAB and internet radios, and smart speakers, and the Pure Elan Connect is one of their best-selling devices on the market today. Okay, so now we've got everything out of the box, let's get started. First up, we're going to get this device plugged into the power bank and switched on. And we're greeted with the first page of the setup wizard, and yes, it's the familiar Frontier Smart Technology startup screen, which means they're using a Frontier chipset at the heart of the internet radio. If you've seen some of my reviews before, you'll recognise this as being the same chipset as in the John Lewis Octave and others. Now we're going to follow the on-screen wizard, and I'll get this connected to the Wi-Fi. We'll click on the select button and we're prompted to start the wizard as usual. We'll click yes and choose the 24-hour clock. And then select Get Our Updates from the network. Set the time zone with daylight savings enabled. Then we want to ensure that we keep a connection to the Wi-Fi, so we'll enable that. And at this point we'll start looking for local Wi-Fi networks. Once it finds them, it will display a list. One moment while I find mine, and then I can use WPS to get it connected. And luckily it does connect using WPS the very first time. Now I've had mixed success with internet radios I've tested in the past and WPS, so it's good to see this works on the Elan Connect straight away. Sometimes at this point we will be prompted for a firmware update, and if we are, we should continue to do that. Either way, once the setup is finished, the radio will push us straight back into the internet radio station search facility, but I don't want to start with that. I want to take you through the physical buttons on the front of the case because I always get asked and I usually forget to cover them. Okay, starting from left to right at the top, we have 3 buttons. 1 and 2 are the first and second presets, so a short press will return to the station stored in them. And if you have a radio station already playing, then a long press on either of these buttons will store it directly in that location. Now if you want to recall more of your presets, then simply short press the 3+ button. You go into a recall from preset mode and use the rotary wheel to choose the existing station location. Press the rotary dial again to choose to listen to that station. To store stations in those extra locations, you need to long press the 3+ button. You'll immediately go into the Save to Preset mode, use the dial to go to an empty location and press the rotary dial to store that station. I should mention that you can't delete stations that you've already stored. You can only overwrite them. Finally, we come to the last button on the top row, the Info button. And when you're playing a station, you can press this multiple times to cycle through the extra information that digital stations can provide, like bitrate, the track that's playing, signal strength, etc. Moving down to the bottom of the screen, going down the left-hand side first, we have the Home button, which goes back to the main menu of whatever option you've selected. So on DAB, it's the DAB menu. On the Internet Radio, it's the Internet Radio menu, etc. The next button down on the left is a Source button, and from here you can cycle through the 5 options that the Elan has to generate sound. Internet Radio, podcasts, DAB radio, FM radio, or a Bluetooth sound source. And finally on the left we have the Return or the Back button, which essentially takes you back one level up from wherever you are at the current time. So if you're buried 3 levels deep in menus, pressing this button 3 times will take you up to the main menu again. Moving across, we've got the central rotary dial or jog wheel, whatever you want to call it, and it has different purposes depending on the context. So if you're listening to a station, rotating it will give you a volume up and down. A short press will mute the audio, and a long press will turn off the radio. But if you're in a menu, then rotating it left and right will take you up and down the options, and a short press will act as a select. Finally, moving to the right side, we have 3 buttons which act either as tuning buttons if you're listening to FM, or if you're connected to Bluetooth, it will act as transport controls, pausing, playing, forwarding, etc. for the track that you're listening to. So these functions of the buttons are identical to those on the Lemega IR1, but the Elan Connect uses icons rather than words to denote the action of each button, something which I think gives the Pure device an edge over the Lemega radio. Now, we've covered the buttons on the outside of the radio. It's about this time in one of my reviews when I start going through all of the on-screen settings. And yes, I'm still going to do that here, but because we've seen the same display in other devices I've already done reviews on, I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time in each section because you'll have probably seen it all before. So, the way that the Frontier Technology menu system works is that it's context sensitive for the menus on each of the sound sources. But for the general settings, which affect the whole radio, those are also duplicated at the bottom of each of the menus in each section. Let me explain by pressing the source option and going first into the Internet Radio menu. First, you'll see the top level menu items, which include the stations list and your last listened options and anything specifically related to the Internet Radio, and I'll come back to that later. But you'll also see system settings, which is where you configure the general radio settings. Going back into the source, we can then choose DAB, go back into the menu options again, and this time we'll see the DAB related configuration information, but also, again, at the bottom, we'll see system settings. Again, that is duplicated across the remaining 2 sound sources. So wherever you are, you'll be able to change the setting of this service you're listening to and change the settings of the whole radio. Now, while we're playing about with the system menu, why don't we have a quick look at what sort of options you get in this section? So you have a graphic equalizer, which means you can choose a sound profile for the type of audio you're listening to, or you can alter the frequency response yourself and store it in a profile. You've got a sleep option to set a time when the radio will switch off. There's an option for setting up alarms, one which sets the streaming audio quality in case you have a poor internet connection, a comprehensive set of options for network quality for the Wi-Fi or Ethernet if your radio has that option, some general time and date and language options. And right at the bottom we have settings for the backlight and screen brightness. Your options are a high, medium and low for screen brightness when it's on, the same for when it's in standby, and a timeout setting if you want the screen to go completely blank until you've pressed a button. Any radio, including this one, that uses the Frontier chipset does not appear to have an auto-dim facility. And we can finish this section with a quick whiz round the configuration options you have for each of the sound sources. Now, we've already touched on the internet radio settings, and there isn't much left to cover there, so we'll skip that and we'll start with FM. For FM, the options are basically to choose to scan strong or weak signals, choose a mono or stereo reception for weak signals, and that's about it. For DAB, you have a list of all DAB stations on the radio, options to scan for new stations. You can manually tune to the DAB frequencies, but seriously, who would do that? And you can also get rid of old stations, set different levels of compression, and order the stations in alphabetical order or by DAB multiplex. Then there is Bluetooth, and from here you pair devices, see information about the version of Bluetooth the radio is using, and information on what devices are paired and connected to it. That's all there is to it. And no, I'm not going to go through pairing devices with Bluetooth again. It's 2023, I've covered it before, nothing has changed. And now for one last thing before we move on, because people will mention it. You can use the Frontier Technologies Undok app with this radio, and it's essentially, you can use it as a remote control, as anything on the front or in the menus of this device is mirrored in the app. And for what it's worth, although it has its flaws, the Undok app is still the best for controlling internet radios. So if that's important to you, you best choose a radio powered by the Frontier Smart Technology chipset. Now, at this point in any of my reviews, I'm normally ready to test the quality of the sound. But as the main reason I'm reviewing the pure Elan Connect is to compare it with the Lemega IR1, this is probably the best time to get them both together and to go through a proper comparison. So let's bring them both out and put them side by side on the bench. Right, now let's look past the design of the case because it's fairly obvious they're both different. And let's concentrate on the similarities because there are many, many more of those. Externally, all of the buttons on the front have the same functionality. As I touched on earlier, the Pure goes for icons, while the Lemega mixes icons for things like forward and pause, etc., with terms for menu, back and info, etc. Again, as I said before, I think the icons will work much better in regions where English is not the main language. Moving on to the screen, the Elan Connect has a slightly larger aspect ratio and has a matte effect display, while the Lemega has a gloss screen and I think is a tiny bit sharper. However, both of these points are very, very marginal. Looking from the top of each of these devices, you'll see the Pure radio is a little thicker, and I think I know why this is. Hopefully, we'll find out a little later. And then on the rear, they are absolutely identical, with a battery compartment taking 4 AA's that can't be opened without moving the aerial. This is one of the items I touched on the original Lemega review. Speaking of the aerial, if you're interested, the one on the Pure extends to 54 centimeters, while the Lemega's only extends to 48 centimeters. Neither, I think, are going to be a deal breaker on the reception front, because they're both equally terrible for picking up FM reception, but fine for DAB. And finishing up round the back, both can be powered by a 5-volt DC supply from a USB micro B cable, and they both have a 3.5mm jack socket for headphones. And yes, I have checked on the jack socket for the headphones, it is stereo. And finally, on the outside, we may as well cover the weight of each device for the sake of completeness. If you're interested, the IR1 is 424 grams, whilst the Elan Connect is a little heavier at 448 grams. Right, now let's flip these devices around, plug them in and power them on. And what you'll see is 99.9% identical, but you're probably not amazed by that fact. The differences are mostly superficial. You'll see that the Lemega radio uses the stock icons that come with all Frontier Smart Technology systems, but Pure have updated the icons to match more of their corporate look. On this screen, you'll see that the DAB and Wi-Fi signal icons are different, and Pure uses the heart symbol to depict a favoured station, while Lemega utilises the standard star to denote the same thing. If we go to the source menu options, the differences are more obvious, with Pure having a much more clean, circular set of icons. The observant of you will also notice that Pure has an extra icon for podcasts, and I'll come to that a little later. If we go to the source option on both and click Internet Radio and then into Menu, we can see that mostly we have the same options such as UK, Search, Location, Popular, Discover. The IR1 has a history option here, whereas if we flip up one level on the Pure, it's called Last Listened. It's the same functionality, but slightly moved around to aid navigation, and that's the superficial differences as far as I can see on the display. But now, let's concentrate on the reason why the display looks a little different on the Elan to the IR1, and why it has different icons, different menu items, and extra options like podcasts, as I mentioned earlier. You see, Pure are continuing to update their firmware, and Lemega, quite simply, aren't. You can read from this that Pure perform after-sales support on their devices, and Lemega don't, and I think that's an honest assumption. For instance, I reviewed the IR1 way back in November 2020, and I updated the firmware when I first turned it on. You can see it in the video. Now, do you want to take a guess at how many updates I've had since then? That's right, 0, nil, none. And for the Pure, well, I've only turned it on a few times, but I've got an update every single time, and this is why the IR1 is on version 4.1.8 of the Frontier software, and the Elan Connect is on version 4.5.13. Why does this matter, you may ask? Well, apart from the fact that it's nice that a manufacturer actually supports the products it produces, bearing in mind, both the IR1 and the Elan Connect are still listed on the website as being currently sold. These two radios are little computers. They're connecting to your local Wi-Fi network, which is subsequently attached to the internet. Anything which connects to the internet can be vulnerable, and the software will have bugs that need to be patched, and that's true for any internet-enabled device, be it a fridge, a smart light, or scarily of all, your internet-enabled door locks. Always one to think about. Okay, we're on the last leg now. Thank you very much for staying awake for this long. And we're at the stage where we get to hear the Elan Connect in all its glory. Now, if you've seen my reviews before, you'll know the drill by now. I use my Zoom H1N recorder to record directly from the speaker, so you can effectively hear what I hear in the room. Well, we're mostly keeping to the same format today, although I'm upgrading my recording setup this time, and going forward, I'll be using an AKG C1000S microphone into a Focusrite 2i4 audio interface, so you should get a better dynamic range and hopefully something that even more closely represents the sound that I hear. Now, the usual caveats apply. There are flaws in this method, as any background noise in the room will also be picked up by the microphone, and I'll try and keep this to a minimum, but I don't know of any other way of semi-accurately recording what your ears will hear. For obvious reasons, plugging in a cable into the headphone jack just won't give you this. Anyway, let's go into what you'll hear in this demo. First, you'll hear some orchestral music, then some classical piano, some contemporary music, and finally, some speech radio. I'll start the playback of each clip at the mid-volume level, and then move to maximum volume, or at least the highest I can get to without it being unlistenable. You should be able to hear when I make these changes, but I'll also caption this on the screen. So, without further ado, let's hear what this radio sounds like.
Breathe cleaner air every day.
I love my city. I was born here, and I love my culture, my food, and everything. But for the couple of months, I got a big wish to live somewhere. I mean, close to nature, like in the mountains or in the hilly area, stuff like that.
It's actually funny because at the moment I'm speaking to you, James, like now I'm out of Cairo. I'm by the Red Sea coast.
Ah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's way more clear. The air, the weather, the air quality in general is way better here. But I would say every city has its pros and cons, but also, as my colleague says, when you're born and raised in a city, it's your culture, it's your family, it's your
Yeah.
friends, your food, everything. So, yeah, sometimes you take some days, couple weeks off, breathing some clear, fresh air, but you will always get back to where you are.
Anton in Cairo and Imran in Lahore, talking to my colleague James Reynolds.
So there we have it. The pure Elan Connect review ending, of course, in the sound test. Now, I am interested in what you think, so please leave your views in the comments section below. For me, it's a pretty good portable internet radio. It could even be the best there is at that price point. Now, I know what you're saying. Whoa, John, what about the IR1? Well, we know that the Lemega and Pure devices both have the same buttons on the front, and We know they have very similar menu items, so what's the difference? Why choose the Elan Connect over the IR1? Well, let's ignore the looks because that is a personal choice. You can get both models in multiple colours and really that's not going to change much other than whether it fits into your decor when it's sitting on the shelf. But let's concentrate on the one thing that raises the Pure Radio above the IR1, and that is the speaker. You see, remember I said that the Elan Connect was heavier and wider than the IR1 and we didn't know why? Well, now we do. It's because it has a better speaker and driver unit, which means it has better dynamic range and more bass response. Also, well, it's louder and has a higher peak volume. See, if you turn the Pure to 1 on the volume wheel, it's the equivalent of turning the IR1 to a 4 or a 5. See, I had them both running the same radio station next to each other and the Pure would always drown out the Lemega at much, much lower volume levels. Again, I'm not saying that Pure has a stunning output. It does distort a little right at the top end of the volume, and some of the piano music I was playing, well, it hit a strange resonant frequency in the case. So don't worry, audiophiles are not going to be shaking in their shoes and throwing away their very expensive streaming devices, but it's pretty good. It's very compact and there isn't anything really better at the £40 or £50 mark, which is what you can currently get it for in the UK. Anyway, that's all for now. Please like, subscribe and do the little standard YouTube dance, and I'll see you next time, and thanks for watching.